Hello and thanks for joining me. I'm in the workshop and I have decided that the time has come to decat my Scrambler 1200. Now if you own one of these bikes you will know exactly why I'm doing this, but if you're not a Scrambler owner I will very briefly explain. Triumph fit a catalytic converter in these bikes and it's right here under this silver heat shield, so it's part of the header pipe unit of the bike. And of course, in order to work, catalytic converters get extremely hot. They have to get hot to work properly. But what that means is that when you're riding the bike, you've got this very, very hot decat. And then of course the exhaust pipe around it gets hot as well, right next to your leg. And it's even worse when you stop and you put your foot on the ground, if you put your right foot on the ground, because then when you put your foot on the ground, usually your leg is sort of touching against this black bit of the heat shield here. And it can get very, very hot with this heat radiating off here. Now what I've found is when you're riding along normally, it's not a big deal because the heat just dissipates. But if you're in heavy traffic, you're riding slowly, a lot of stop-start, or if you stop at junctions or traffic lights, and you have to put your leg down, particularly in hot weather, it can get very, very uncomfortable. So because of this, most owners, remove the catalytic converter. Now Triumph, being aware of this problem, so in the newer versions of the bike, they've moved the catalytic converter back here into the tailpipe section of the bike. So if you own a newer Scrambler, I believe that you can overcome this issue by simply buying the tailpipe off an older bike like mine. Mine's a 2019 model. Buy the older tailpipe and then fit it on. And so you've got a header unit without the cat in, and tailpipe without the cat in. I believe, I've been told that you can do that. But mine's the older bike, and unfortunately you can't do it the other way around, so you can't buy a newer head unit, I don't think, and put it in. But if you were to do that, it would be very expensive. Now there are various aftermarket solutions to this, so various manufacturers make replacement header pipes without a catalytic converter in, but again they're very, very expensive. So what I'm going to do is the cheap option. In fact, it's so cheap, it's the free option, cost me nothing. I'm simply going to take off my exhaust pipe, remove the catalytic converter from within the exhaust pipe, and then put the existing exhaust pipe back on. And as I said, that will cost me nothing, a couple of hours work, no cost at all. So if you're interested in seeing what I'm doing, then follow along. I'll try and do this job without getting in the way of the camera too much, but essentially I need to take all of the exhaust pipe off to be able to remove the catalytic converter. So I need to remove the rear section of the exhaust pipe, which comes to about here first. So I'll remove this heat shield and then this heat shield, and I can remove this one, and then I can loosen off the bolts that hold on the rear exhaust pipe, slide that off, and then finally I can get the header pipe off. You only need a couple of basic tools to do this job. So these heat shields are fastened on with 5mm Allen head bolts. So I've got my Allen, it's a 5mm, so I've got my Allen head T-driver here. I'll loosen those off. This is sort of rubber mounted, is this heat shield here. Now I take these off. Got my little magnetic tray here to just put all the bolts on as I take them off so I don't lose anything. Right, so that's that rear heat shield off. So you can see that fastens on two places, and then there's little rubber bungs here and here on that, they're just there to sort of stop it from rattling. This midsection heat shield comes off in a similar way. Just undo the two 5mm bolts here. I'll have a look, as well as removing the catalytic converter, I might put some kind of heat, stick-on heat shield on the inside of these. I'll see. I've got some kicking around in the workshop somewhere, sort of like sticky back silver stuff that reflects the heat back. So it might be worth seeing if I can actually wiggle this out. Might be worth seeing if I can actually get some on the inside of this heat shield, just to, you know, minimise the amount of heat. Right, so that's the rest of the heat shields off there. So the rear section of the exhaust pipe, which is this bit here, joins onto the front section. There's the two pipes. This is actually all one unit at the back here, but there's the two separate pipes. So I need to undo these, which again they're just 5mm Allen head. And then you can see just at the edge here, that's the catalytic converter. So I'll just loosen these off. And the clamp, just notice this bottom one, the clamp is at the bottom here. It's not sort of sticking out. If you had it angled round like that, you wouldn't be able to get the heat shield on. So it's at the bottom where it's kind of out the way of the heat shield, but you can still get to it. And this top one it's just at the back and facing straight up. And again, it's tucked out the way of the heat shield, but you can get to the bolt here. So just, you know, make a note of the location of these. Right, so that's both of the exhaust clamps loosened off. So what I need to do now is undo the rear section, the mounting point on the rear section, and then I can slide this whole unit backwards and off. So if you just look down behind the silencer here and just in front of the rear suspension unit, you can just make out there a 12mm bolt head, and that's where the silencer fastens on. So I've got a socket here on a long extension. I'll get that on the mounting bolt and undo that. Right, that's that 12mm bolt out. There is then a second mounting bolt, a lower mounting bolt, which I've just come around the other side of the bike to show you. You can actually reach underneath from the right hand of the side of the bike to get to, but there it is. It's facing inwards towards the wheel on the right hand side of the bike, just below the other one. So you can see it there, but what I'll do is I'll reach underneath and undo that. So the second mounting bolt, which I just showed you from the other side of the bike, is just underneath here and it's facing straight out that way. So you can get a ratchet on it, but it tends to catch on the suspension unit, which is just here. So I'm using this as a slightly offset ring spanner. So the offset here is just enough to clear the suspension unit, and yeah, I can get it. I'm just doing it by feel. You get it on that bolt at the back here, and then undo it. So that's starting to come off now. In fact, I've got that loose. I can actually do it with my fingers. Right, that's the second bolt out. And just note that one's shorter, so just grab the other one. The bolt that came out of the top mount there, you can see is longer. The one that came out of the second one is shorter, so just remember which is which there. Okay. So now I've undone the two mounting bolts, the top and the bottom mounting bolts here. I can just slide this silencer unit back off the header pipe. The two joints here, one for the top pipe and the bottom pipe, there is a gasket on each one of those, so you've got to be careful not to damage those. It's pretty easy to take it off without damaging it, but putting it back on particularly, you've got to be careful not to damage it. But if I just wiggle now and pull this back, there we are, we've got that. So that's the rear, the cans, the rear silencer section removed from the bike. So the header pipe is not fastened on other than just, you know, where it bolts into the cylinder head. So it's fairly easy to remove this. This is the catalytic converter, of course, here that we are getting to inside here to remove. But this header pipe is actually two parts. The pipe that runs over to the left hand side underneath here has a joint with a clamp on it. So you don't need to remove it from the head over on the left hand side. I am going to loosen that off though, but then I will take these flange nuts off and remove the flange on the right hand side, and I'll loosen off the exhaust clamp that runs underneath. Now these flanges are 12mm domed head bolts. Because they're domed and they're quite deep, I'm going to use a deep 12mm socket rather than my short socket, because that goes all the way on like that, and you might need a short extension bar as well. And then there's a 10mm bolt through the exhaust clamp underneath here. It's a 10mm, so you can get in a spanner in sideways. You can't get an Allen head in because the radiator's in the way. So I'll slacken these off, and then we can remove the exhaust pipe. I think it's going to be easier with an extension bar on there, and we're not catching things on that side. Yeah, get my extension bar on and my ratchets out of the way. So the exhaust header flanges are in two pieces, so once you take the flange nuts off, they'll take apart. There's also, of course, the oxygen sensor mounted on the inside. That's a 17mm spanner you need for that. So that's the flange off in this one. I'll just get it clear. There we are. You can see the two parts of the flange there. Put that to one side, and then get my 17mm spanner, and that shouldn't be too tight. That'll be just nipped up the O2 sensor. Actually, that was a bit tighter than I was expecting. But once you've right, then there's plenty of twist in the cable. So when I'm taking the exhaust pipes off, what I do is I tend to just twist the cable as it comes off, and then I pre-twist it when I put it back on again, if that makes sense. So that when I turn it back on, when it's fully seated, then there's no twist in the cable. So you can just, that's the O2 sensor there, you can just tuck that safely out of the way back there. Right, so I'll loosen off this connecting clamp here. I need to get my 10mm socket in there, spanner in there, so a bit fiddly to get in there actually. Bit fiddly, probably can't get in without getting my head in the way of the camera. Bit tight. Sometimes jobs like this just require a bit of patience. It's coming, it's just I'm not getting a lot of leverage on it there. Right, I'll probably edit this down a bit rather than you just watching me turn it a quarter of a turn at a time. Actually, I think I've probably loosened it off enough there. That's good. Right, so I'm just going to pop round the other side of the bike and just loosen off the flange nuts on the left side of the exhaust pipe, and then I can wiggle this whole lot and get it off. Yeah, just give me a bit more play if I do that. So I just popped round the other side, I didn't bother filming it, but I've just loosened off the flange nuts on the other side. I've not taken them right off, not removed the flange, haven't removed the oxygen sensor on that side. Just means that I've got a bit more movement. You can see the whole thing moves around now, because I just want to be able to get that pipe out of the head like that and then just wiggle the joint off, and there we are. So that's the bit that we're wanting to get to. Wanting to get inside this bit then to take the catalytic converter off. So what I will do is I'll go over to the bench, and then there's a weld on each end, and I believe the way they're constructed is the catalytic converter is fed in from the front that way, and then it's welded up. It's welded up here. So I'm going to cut this weld off on this side. So you can see in my workshop I've got a selection of different cutting discs and other things for my angle grinders here. So what I've done is I've selected a very thin metal cutting disc that's suitable for cutting stainless steel. I've got the exhaust header pipe in my vise here on the bench. I've got it in soft jaw so I'm not damaging it. And what I'm going to do is, I just get a pointer here, something. I'm going to cut round this weld here. You might be able to see that the outer bit that goes out to the pipes here is slightly larger, so that obviously slides onto the thinner bit, and you can see where it just kind of recesses slightly here. So I'm going to follow just round the inside of the weld line round here, and cut all the way round. So I'll have to turn it round in the vise halfway round, cut all the way around there, and then I'll be able to remove this front section and hopefully just pull the catalytic converter out. Okay, so I think I got it all the way around. Yeah, I felt it go on that last bit. So there we are. That's the catalytic. Oops, that's the catalytic converter there. Now I've just got to get this out of the header section. Right, so that is the catalytic converter out of the exhaust header. So I've got the two parts of the header that I cut apart. So what I need to do now is just weld those back together like this, and you can see inside there we've got no catalytic converter there. So weld those back together, then I can pop it back on the bike, and we've done a decat. Okay, so it's actually been a couple of days since I recorded the video of me taking the exhaust off the bike and removing the catalytic converter. I'm not a full-time YouTuber, this is just a hobby, and so sometimes other life events get in the way, and I've been rather busy with other things for the last couple of days. But one positive thing about having a couple of days off is I've actually got the exhaust header re-welded. Now I have a MIG welder and I do welding myself, but I'm not the world's best welder, and I have a friend, Sean, who has a TIG welder and he's a pretty good welder, and he volunteered to weld it up for me, and I'm glad that he did, because he's made a beautiful job of it. Just look at that. This is the weld that Sean has done with his MIG welder, where he's just, you know, fastened it back together. And if you have a look, compare that to the original weld, you know, it came out of the factory, which looks to me like it was probably done with a MIG. You tend to get sort of better penetration melting the metal with a TIG welder. Yeah, it's done actually a much nicer weld than the factory weld, and it's a real pity actually that's going to be hidden behind the heat shield. Anyway, so you know, just to remind you, I cut this open all around here, pulled out the catalytic converter, and then my friend Sean's welded it back together for me. So now I'm going to stick it back on the bike. So because I left the bike standing for a couple of days, I just shoved these rags into the exhaust ports just to stop any dirt or stuff getting in there. So now I'm going to reassemble it, and reassembly is really just the reverse process of what I did before. I'm going to reassemble the joints dry, but sometimes when I reassemble it, if it's difficult getting them in, I use this stuff, which is exhaust assembly paste, and I find that helps. That just kind of helps lubricate the joints as you put them back together. And of course, this stuff bakes dry and helps with the seal as well, helps create a better seal in the exhaust. But because we've already got these you know, joints which are fair, you know, they're in nice condition. As long as I'm careful putting them back together, I think they should be absolutely fine. I've loosened off this header pipe here just so I've got a bit more wiggle with putting it all back together, and it is a bit awkward as this. You've just got to be patient, and as I say, wiggle it back together, and just be careful not to damage the gasket there. As I say, it's in nice condition, is that gasket. So there we are. That's gone on quite nicely. Just reach around, and what I'm going to do is reassemble the whole system very loosely without actually tightening anything up, including the joint, the back here, and the rest of the silencer unit fits on. And then once I'm happy that I've got all the joints back together, then I'll tighten everything up. So put these collets back on, and of course mustn't forget to put the oxygen sensor. Hope you can't see that, the oxygen sensor on here as well, but I'll put the collet on first. Should be pretty obvious which way, this is a split collet, it should be pretty obvious which way it goes on, because there's this cutout here for where the oxygen sensor goes. So again, it's a bit fiddly getting these on, but it's probably hard for me to do it without getting my hands in the way. But there we are. That's that on, and I'll just put the domed nuts on there loosely, just to hold it in place. It's really fiddly trying to do this in a way where I'm keeping my hands out the way of the camera and obviously failing miserably. Right, okay, so that's the header on. Let's put the rest of the exhaust back on. One interesting thing about taking this you know, rear silencer unit off the bike is it's made me appreciate just how heavy this damn thing is. Really is heavy. So it has made me seriously consider, you know, getting an aftermarket lighter weight silencer unit, and you know, maybe with the money that I've saved on the decat, I'll put some of that towards a replacement silencer. But anyway, we'll put this one back on because I'm perfectly happy with it in terms of performance. So again, it's just a case of wiggling these joints on, keep those clamps out of the way, trying to get these joints on without damaging the gaskets. Just wiggle those on, and then you hopefully recall I said this, the longer bolt is the one that goes down from the top, and the shorter bolt is the one that goes from the inside. So get these lined up, get these bolts in. Right, that's the silencer unit bolted back on. Now I'm going to tighten up all the clamps. I'll start by tightening the flange here where the exhaust goes into the cylinder head, because that needs to sit properly, and then we can align all of the other the joints around that. Need an extension on there, linking to that. Remember from doing it before I used an extension. That's it, I'll reach that now. Okay, so that's seating properly. So here's just a little tip with the sensor. What I'm going to do is pre-twist it by, you know, turning it like this, pre-twist it so that when I put it in and screw it on, then the cable will be straight. So how far do I twist it? Well, I'll just count the number of threads on here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 threads. So I need to give it 5 twists round before I insert it back into the exhaust, and then hopefully once I've tightened it up it will sit straight. Right, that's that oxygen sensor back in. Now I can tighten up the various exhaust clamps. Because it's tucked away, it's very difficult to get it in the camera, but this is the first joint I'm going to tighten up here, which is the one that passes over to the left-hand cylinder, where the header pipe goes to the left-hand cylinder, and it's a 10mm bolt on here to tighten it up, and it's a bit fiddly to get to. You can only get sort of about an eighth of a turn at a time on the spanner, so you've just got to be patient with it. And then the last bit for reassembly is tightening up the 2 clamps that fasten the header unit to the exhaust unit. And remember, when I was taking this apart, you've got to get the alignment of these clamps right so that it clears the heat shield. So this these fasten up with a 5mm Allen head wrench. So this bottom one, the clamp is underneath, facing outwards, like this. And this top one, the bolt is at the back facing up, so I need to get my Allen wrench in from the top there, do it up like that. So honestly, this was such a quick and easy job. I mean, I've found with doing YouTube videos that filming everything takes 3-4 times as long because you're constantly moving the camera and setting up the camera. But even then, this has taken me less than 15 minutes, even with the filming. So that's all the exhaust back on. What I'll do is I'll pop the heat shields back on now. So first thing is put these rubbers back on here. There's 3 little clips here where the heat shield fastens on over what was the catalytic converter, which is now just an empty box. So put those on. Then I'll grab the heat shields and put those back on. When you're fitting the heat shields back on, you have to start at the front. The front one goes on first, and then the midsection, and then you put the little thing on the back here, you know, like the number plate on. This front one just slides on here onto this mount, and then it will secure on the bolt there. But before I put it in, I had said that what I might do is just put some heat shield on the inside of this. I just had a rummage around, and I've got this little piece here left over from another job. So this is if you can see, this side is the heat shield, and then it's like sticky back, and that looks to me like exactly the right size. So what I'm going to do is, before I pop this on, I'm going to stick some of this heat shield just on the inside of this. Right, so there, I've just cut a section of that heat shield out, stuck it on the inside of there. It's sticky back, so just trying to mould it into shape. It doesn't have to be perfect, of course, because you're not going to see it. It just has to be there to protect against the heat. So that's an additional bit of protection on there. Give it a go and see. Right, so I'm going to slide this on here over these little rubbers. Bit fiddly. You just kind of sort of got to do it by feel. That's it. That's on. And then, as I say, that will secure on to that bolt when I fasten the middle section on. So that looks okay to me. Right, the middle section then. Bizarrely, this has some of this kind of heat shield on, but not in this middle section here. I'm not sure why there's none in this section. This is 2-part unit. This is the inner part, and then this is the outer part. And obviously this has got heat shield on here. You don't want to put any over the mesh because that's part of the ventilation. But I'm tempted. I've just got a little bit more of that heat shield, so I'm tempted to put some on here on this middle section before I put this back on. Right, there we are. Admittedly, that is a bit messy because I'm literally just using up scraps of the heat shield, but actually that's the very last of the bit I had left, but that just fits nicely. I just cut a little bit around there to around that rubber bung. So let's get this back on the bike. So what I find with this is you've got to feed it under that clip at the back first, and then you feed it forward onto where the clamps sit. And then we've got the outer piece here, and that goes on the same way. You just got to sort of feed it in, and this tucks under the front of this heat shield here. Right, and then we've got the two Allen head bolts, fasten that on. And the last bit is this rear heat shield, which goes over the exhaust units here. Now there's absolutely no, it's a bit dirty under there, but there's absolutely no heat shield on that. I haven't got any left to put on there anyway, but I don't think I need any on there because, you know, I'm not carrying a pillion, and that's behind my leg. But yeah, I'd just be interested to see how that pans out. Right, so let's get these Allen heads in there, get those lined up. Get that tightened up, and that's it. That's the exhaust system back on. Well, excellent. So, snip those up. Great. So now that I've got the exhaust system all back on, what I'm going to do is take the bike outside, start the engine without touching the throttle, and just let it run for about 20 minutes so the ECU can readjust. Now, you may remember in an earlier video when I did the 10,000 mile service on the bike, I replaced the standard paper air filter with a fabric filter, a high flow filter, and I also removed the snorkel from the airbox. So it'd be very interesting to see now, and particularly after I've readjusted the ECU, how the bike performs where it's got better airflow coming in through the airbox and better airflow through the exhaust. But first of all, I'm going to take the bike outside, start it up, just let it tick over. I think I'll go make a cup of coffee, and then I'll get back to you after. Right, so here I am out for a test ride on the newly decatted Scrambler, and there are three things that I'm interested in checking out on this little test ride. First and foremost, what's the heat like from the exhaust? That is the reason that I've done the decat. But secondly, has it had an impact on performance? And thirdly, what does the exhaust sound like without the catalytic converter in there? So I've been riding a while now, you know, long enough to sort of get a feel with the heat from the exhaust. It's not a very hot day, as you can see. It's pretty miserable weather. It's autumn here. It's pretty cool, foggy, so not necessarily the best weather for checking it out, but yeah, I can say there's definitely feels like there's a lot less heat coming off that exhaust. Still warm, you still got a warm exhaust next to your leg, but nothing like what it was like before. Performance feels better. I'm just about to turn up here onto the dual carriageway where I can really open it up. So let's see, rip it open up here. Whoa! Whoa! Wow! Now I don't know if I don't know if this is just my perception, but the bike really feels like it's got more torque. When I opened it up there, it really ripping like it's not done before. I don't know. It could just be, you know, my perception, but it definitely feels like it's got a lot more pickup there. Certainly in, you know, second gear, pulling there. Switch the traction control off, and that front wheel's going to be straight up there. Yeah, it definitely feels like quite a big improvement in the performance. Don't forget, I've done the air filter and the airbox as well, so a combination of the two. I'd have to get it on the rolling road and check the numbers to see if it's actually got more torque and more power, but it certainly feels like it to me. Now, in terms of the exhaust note,
doesn't sound that much different to me when I'm riding, but of course the exhaust blowing away at the back, isn't it? So what I need to do is pull over somewhere and you know, let you have a listen to it, see what you think. Slightly deeper, slightly throatier sound, I think, but certainly not offensive. We're in a 40 mile an hour here, which nobody takes any notice of. You can see that van flying past. But yeah, just coming to this traffic light here, so when I stop and put my leg down, we'll see what it feels like, because that's when you really feel the heat. If I put my right leg down here when I stop at the lights, I said it's a cold day, but even then, I've just got a pair of jeans on. Yeah, and I've got my leg down, I've got my leg touching against the exhaust, just feeling it there. Definitely much cooler than it used to be. Yeah, very happy with that. Nowhere near as much heat coming off there. I've just got a pair of Kevlar light jeans on, so the heat comes straight through those, and I can really feel the difference. Let's open it up again round here. Just be careful, the roads are a bit greasy, but whoa, yeah, loving this. Yeah, it really does feel like it goes better. That's not why I did it, that's not why I took it out, it was for the heat, but nice. We'll have to see in the longer term. Right, let me find somewhere to pull over, and I'll let you see for yourself what you think it sounds like. So lastly, I've just pulled over so you can have a listen to the exhaust, see what you think of it. I've got the bike ticking over here. I think it's got a bit more of a rumble to it, and yeah, definitely got more of a crack to it when you blink the throttle. I'll show you. Nice, but not offensive, which I'm very happy with. So I hope you found this video interesting. I hope you found it useful if you're considering decatting your own bike. Please click the like button, consider subscribing if you haven't already done so, and see you again soon. Ride safe, bye.